Hob is the new game from Runic Games, the guys that made Torchlight and the sequel, which is called Torchlight 2. And this is Hob, which, Brian Shea, you're going to tell me about. It sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, so it's not very similar to Torchlight at all. So if you're going into it thinking, oh, it's the guys who made Torchlight, and I'm going to like this game because I like Torchlight, it is a very different experience, but I think it's also a very promising experience. Rather than going the route of Torchlight, which is kind of more like RPG heavy, this is kind of minimalist. It takes inspiration from Dark Souls and top-down Zelda games, and mixes in a little bit of Shadow of the Colossus in terms of like its presentation and especially in its sound design. It's very minimalist. It's kind of a unique blend of puzzles, platforming, and combat. Something that's very interesting about it is it definitely focuses more on the puzzles than I anticipated. Going in thinking like, oh, well, it's a game that takes inspiration from Dark Souls and Zelda. I was very surprised. Like I've played 4 different demos of this game now, but in the most recent demos, I'm very surprised by how puzzle heavy it is. Like there's some platforming, there's some combat, and it feels good, but like the puzzles are definitely the greatest chunk of this game, at least in the demos that I've played.
Are you collecting loot a la Torchlight, or are you are you kind of collecting permanent items like Zelda?
So you go around and there are power-ups that you can acquire. Like one I got was I could teleport. So now I hit the R1 button on the PlayStation 4 controller, and it allows me to, kind of like leap forward. Like there's a roll button that you can also use to dodge, but now I can use the teleportation to not only dodge enemies and stun them if I dodge through them, but you can also jump up in the air and hit the teleport button, and you'll do like a slam on the ground, and like you'll teleport into the ground, and that'll stun all the enemies in an area. And you can also do that same motion only with a heavy attack, and you'll do like kind of like a ground pound that'll do an area of effect as well. But no, there's no loot. You can go around and like cut grass, kind of like old school Zelda games with your sword. But what that'll do is it'll just leave like health orbs for you to collect. And you have a health bar, very similar to Zelda, where it's like, you get hit and you lose a segment of that health bar.
So like most video games ever.
Yes. But it's presented very similar. Like as you go around and collect, like you find collectibles and those add to your health bar. Like, hey, I added a new segment because there's flowers that you can find in the overworld that you open up and that gives you a health bar, and like that's like a heart container from Zelda. Or when you're down in a dungeon, you can find a robot or a construct, as they're called in the world, and if you take their core, that gives you an extra bar on your stamina meter. And stamina affects things like how long you can block using your shield. Also, when you fall, it takes away from your stamina bar before it takes away from your health for like fall damage. I think that something that's really interesting is that it's kind of like this mysterious world. Like your character awakens. It's a nameless character. They haven't really assigned a gender to the character. We asked Runic Games what they call it internally, like if they have like a code name, and like we just call it Hero. And so it's this mysterious character, doesn't know its origin really. It just kind of woke up in this world. It thinks it's the only one of its kind. So it's exploring this world, and the world itself is kind of consumed by nature, but it's mechanical in nature. Like the heart of the world is mechanical, but it's been overrun by like grass and everything from something that must have happened that like wiped out whatever put these machines there. As the character, you're going around and restoring power to these things to try to crack the mystery of like what this world was. And it almost alludes to the fact that your race, that like the character's race, was what installed these machines all over the planet, but it's not clear. It's a wordless narrative game also, so you kind of have to draw assumptions based on like the events happening in the game. And that's something that's also pretty cool, is that when you do something in the dungeon, so if you restore a power to one of the dungeons, like I think both of the dungeons that I played, like the purpose was to go down, like get all the way to the bottom and restore power to this area. And that's how you completed the dungeon, by restoring power. And when you came back up out of the world around that dungeon was different because there's power restored to this machine below the world. What's kind of cool is that a lot of the world is not necessarily about good and evil. Like it's not like a Zelda game where it's like, oh, the incarnation of evil is taking over Hyrule. It's like you're just in this world and there's no real sense of good and evil.
Is it possible, Brian Shea, that you are the bad guy in this game?
I think it is possible. I think because you're going in and you're restoring these power to these things that are like nature has overtaken them, and then it affects the world above you. So maybe if you go down, like, are you really helping this world by restoring the power to these machines? Could it be that the machines were turned off and the whatever put them there was wiped out for a reason? I mean, it's entirely possible. But the game itself is gorgeous. It's a very striking visual style. You don't get any XP for combat. You don't get any XP for platforming well or solving the puzzles. But if you explore, just like in a Zelda game, you will find those heart containers or the flowers that give you the seed for the extra heart or the extra health segment. It's all about exploration, and then, like, from what I've seen, the puzzles are definitely the emphasis.
You've played a fair bit of this. You're excited about it, right?
I am, yeah. It's at PAX East this weekend. I got to play that build, and it's definitely a super cool looking game. I think it has a lot of potential, and it's right up my alley in terms of like things I enjoy. I'm not a big Dark Souls fan, but the elements that I do enjoy, like the combat being very intentional and the various ways that you can like approach a battle, it takes those things and puts them into the framework of something that I do enjoy, like a retro Zelda game.
So that's Hob. It's coming out this year, PC, PS4. Kind of reminds you of games like Zelda, Dark Souls, maybe a little Hyper Light Drifter, or
maybe, yeah.
As I like to call them, good games. And we'll be playing it soon. Thanks, Brian Shea.
Hey, thanks for having me.